And we're up.
All right.
Thanks for hopping on, man.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
Listen, I appreciate you coming up and having a chat with us prior to prior to um, us having like just learning about what we're doing. You're coming up from Flagler, and for those that are going to listen and watch, why don't you introduce yourself and who you are?
Sure. So my name is Connor Gettemy. Everyone calls me Coach G, but I do have a first name. It is Connor. I'm the director of sports performance at Flagler College. We're a D2 school in St. Augustine, Florida, and then I own Get Strong Performance. So obviously, with Flagler, I work exclusively with college athletes. With Get Strong, that was kind of born as a way to specialize with high school or even earlier, like adolescent, middle school athletes. I've been at Flagler.
Nice.
I've been at Flagler for a little over 6 years. I've been a strength coach for a little over 11, and it's maybe a good thing or a bad thing, but I couldn't really see myself doing anything else.
No, I think it's a great thing, man. I think it's you never work a day in your life if you get to do what you love. And now sometimes there's a lot more work that we really don't see as performance coaches, and I think there's a lot of things where you know how in depth do you want to make your programs, and how in depth do you want to make your systems, etc. So there's obviously you've come across where there's trainers that have lollygagged and they just come up with the session the day of or week of, and then you have coaches that sit down, write it out, think it out, plan. They try to do everything they can to make sure that athletes actually improve and reduce injury risk, and work together with medical. And they're really forward-thinking coaches. And I got a little bit of that from you when we were having that conversation. That you've been doing this for 11 years, and you've seen the training things evolve. You've seen college game evolve. You've seen the way athletes are 11 years ago to the way athletes are today. Take us a little bit through that journey of like, hey, this is when I came into strength and conditioning, this is what it looked like versus what it is now.
Um, that's a good. Well, it's a good question because I think there's what the actual reality of the industry was, whether that's the best practices or the athletes themselves. Um, that certainly has changed over the last 11 years, but then also there's the lens through which I personally observed it. So my own biases and my own knowledge or lack thereof um, also informed what I was seeing 11 years ago versus today. So it's kind of what you had touched on of like there's that spectrum of strength coach where it's are there some bad like are there objectively bad strength coaches? Yes, absolutely. Like we need to have some sort of standards, but having had the privilege of talking to tons of different people from the elite power five or even just listening to, not necessarily getting to have a conversation, but all the way down to high school, not to say that that's any better or worse, but just all manner of uh, um, level of athlete. It's incredible to see that across the spectrum, anything can. There are many contexts in which less is more works, or get as far into the weeds as possible also works. So there's, I think if you had to err on the side of one or the other, I think it's better to have over plan and then okay, we had to throw certain things out or we had to cut things or we had to kind of change it on the fly, as opposed to, like you said, you can't lean into and then rely on every day. Hey, I'm just going to whip up a workout every single day. Once you get, say, um, into that maybe tournament season where you're like, we don't know if we will play tomorrow because this is an elimination game. That's when it gets into, well, we're kind of shooting from the hip here. Let's go on the fly. Let's maybe have a chat before the lift. How you guys feeling? Okay, we're rocked with this, and this. Okay, well, how about we do this instead? Like, it's very informal. It's very improvisational. It's still informed by your knowledge of, okay, based on the information given to me, I'm going to interpret that and then come up with the best case scenario. But then, like I said, on the flip side, you can sit down and plan out, which I do, an entire training year, what we kind of call like a skeleton of, I might not be picking out, say, sets and reps on from a session that's 36 weeks from now, but I more than like absolutely have a broad enough framework that I can look at it and go, this is where I want this to trend, and how are we going to be able to get there? So I suppose, I mean, to get back to your question and actually give you a concrete answer, what has changed? Um, I think what I've seen, and maybe this is just me becoming more knowledgeable and kind of coming down from the other side of the bell curve. Hopefully, I am. Is the uh, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it, but I think you and I talked about it in our earlier conversation. I talked about Jovanovic, agile periodization, talking about small world models. Small world model meaning it's an assumption that you make that is correct often enough that you can operate on it for a while. So, okay, sets of 5 down to 1 is quote unquote for strength. Okay, fine. Let's roll with that and let's apply it, and let's, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But at some point in time, you will encounter something that doesn't fit into the small world model that you've created for yourself. So what you can't do is assume that the fault is with the thing and not with your model. You have to go back and update the model or use a different model. You can't just assume, well, this person doesn't fit into my model, so it's the person.
Right. Right.
I think that probably is what has changed the most for me, whether that's just based on my own perspective or whether the industry actually has changed. But it's a willingness to really start to get outside the box and like, hey, you know what? Let's try some weird stuff. And if it works, great. If the athletes buy into it, great. And if we see the needle moving in the right direction, then if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid. It looks a little silly, but I mean, if it works,
Do
it
you
works.
think that just boils down to like comfortability in coaches where after a certain amount of time they felt comfortable, everything works, we're not going to change anything, and then things start to not work and they just refuse to make adjustments, they refuse to make changes. Hey, I've been doing this for whatever 20 years, and it works. Well, it may
Yeah,
have worked for that athlete 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, but as our society has changed, so have our athletic development, and so is the generational, athlete,
yeah,
and having the ability to make those pivots, having the ability to broaden your in depth and not have be stuck into that one philosophy. So I think what you're saying, and at least if what I'm listening is not to be stuck inside of your own or a philosophy.
yeah, yeah. Like,
So I remember having that a little bit of that conversation with you where I felt like I'm not stuck in a philosophy. Now there's certain things that I feel very strongly about, and obviously
sure.
I'll touch base with you again on it. It's bilateral back squats for soccer players, and but I'm not. I think it's
Hey, sorry to interrupt you, but your audio just went out.
oh, that's crazy.
There you
All right, I wanted to make sure. Can you hear me?
go. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so I'm not sure what part it stopped on or where you couldn't hear me, but
I lost you at as soon as you said back squat.
okay, there it
Yeah,
is. Everybody loses me as soon as I say I don't like back squatting soccer players. They're like, all right, we're out of here. This
oh,
guy's crazy.
fine. Just put
Yeah,
some out
bye.
on that.
So it's not the exercise that is the issue. It's the implementation of the exercise to what sport it is. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're a football player, if you're a lineman, I think that you absolutely need to be doing some type of squatting, back squatting, front squatting, etc.
Yeah,
But I think again, not being married to a singular philosophy, not being married to a singular philosophy is really important today, because the microwave society that we live in, kids go see these YouTube videos, they want to see these cool exercises done on agility ladders or sleds or boxes or hang clean, whatever it is that they're seeing. It's like this microcosm of stuff thrown together, and athletes expect this is what it is.
yeah,
And
yeah,
sometimes when we don't. And from my perspective is just preparing the athlete for guys like you who are either going to, the conversations that I've had in the past with strength coaches is like, hey, don't teach hang cleans as much because we're going to do that. We're going to probably change what you taught. What they need is come in with, can they hip hinge? Can they squat? Can they push? Can they pull? Give them the actual foundation of those movements, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, and I'll touch on that. But there's one you just because you had kind of mentioned it brought up a phrase that you hear it all the time with like once successful college coaches, and let's just say college football, and they've won national championships, but now they're putting together like stringing together like 5 and 7 seasons or something like that, and people say the game has passed them by. I think that's kind of a similar thing that could happen, which is you didn't suddenly forget ball in the same way that like strength coach, you did that stuff didn't suddenly like you didn't suddenly become a bad coach. You just developed that model, and then as you said, kind of refused to change. Um, the fundamental principles still apply, but there's so many variables around those fundamental principles that you may have to tweak them, here and there. I think I'd said this in our earlier conversation. You can't approach every single event in life like it's a brand new phenomenon. That's you would never get anything done. You have to make assumptions and you have to create uh, presuppositions for the sake of convenience, for the sake of being able to just go, okay, I know what's going to happen here. Let's make decisions. It's when you're confronted with, all right, well, that didn't work. It was supposed to, but it didn't. So when you're confronted with that, then it's, all right, well, I got to do something about that. I can't just plow through and keep pushing them through the same thing. Um, but yeah, what you had most recently said, like the very last thing you said, that's the same thing that I'll say to anybody that comes through any especially high school kid that comes through the weight room, whether it's them or their parents or both. It's uh, just make sure you're moving well. If you move well and you come in kind of strong, good for you. That's a nice bonus, and it's not working against you. But if you are going to stress out about something of like, how do I prepare for the quote unquote next level? If I'm in high school and going to college, any strength coach worth their salt is going to say, just bring me a kid that moves immaculately well and can be cued and understands the difference between a hip hinge and a squat and is stable on one leg, this, that, the other thing. That is so much more easy to, or that's so much more broad of a baseline with which to start training than it is, okay, not only do you move poorly, but you have ingrained these patterns through weight you shouldn't have been bearing. Um, and so now we have to spend X amount of time getting you out of those habits. You're not going to have any fun because you're not going to get to use the weight you're usually using. And you're probably going to be bad at it because the patterns that we're trying to get you out of, or we're going to put you into specific patterns that you weren't doing before. And so then even once we spend X amount of months or however much time getting you out of those bad habits, now we're at ground zero. So we've just lost however much percent of your college career having to fix what you might have done to yourself simply because you were stressed out about the wrong thing and you were focused on I got to impress these people with my max back squat rather than, wow, does he have the hip and knee flexion and proprioception necessary to do some cool athletic stuff.
Yeah, and the thing I've encountered is that seniors in high school that's probably spent a total of a couple months in a weight room over a course of their entire high school career
Mm-hmm.
wants to now, hey, the summer before, hey, I have to get ready for college.
Yeah.
We these are conversations that we've had with parents, obviously with athletes, is like, hey, getting you prepared for college in 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whenever you're asked to report in, it's we're going to teach you as much as we can. We're going to emphasize movement as much as we can. We'll try to make as many adaptations as we can in that amount of time. But do not expect you to go in at the top of your class
Yeah.
in the sense of how you're performing. Now, obviously, certain sports require different things, and if you're a very skilled, athlete, and your skill kind of trumps everything else, where you can, get away with the skill, that'll only last for so long in college, especially in a collision sport like football. But I think sports like baseball that really early on adopted the data and really looked at how baseball players were throwing, how they were moving, how they were, the rotations on a ball. I mean, they got so specific in how a baseball player should train. Obviously, then we get into the argument of, well, should a baseball player bench press, or should, what should they be doing with their shoulders? And again, I think it boils down to capacity
Mm-hmm.
and the capacity of the shoulder. So if they started early on and they are maybe they have a little bit more capacity, the range of motion is better, they understand the proper movement patterns in the bench press, then yeah, maybe it's okay for that baseball player to bench press.
Mm-hmm.
But do they really need a bench press, hundreds of pounds to actually increase velocity? I don't think so, because we've been able to do that at least at the high school level. Now these are kids making adaptations. I get it, but even the pro guys that we've worked with in the past, they've been able to increase velocity, whether that was hitting velocity. Sorry, whether that's hitting velocity or throwing velocity without a bench press,
Mm-hmm.
right? We've been able to use alternatives like landmines or alternatives like medicine balls and kettlebells. Um, but those are some of the things. Again, not being married to a philosophy where I go, hey, that athlete may actually need the bench or may need to develop something in shoulder, or they have the capacity to do that.
Yeah.
Again, that goes. I think we've had that kind of in-depth conversation of exercise selection, and
Yeah. Just since you had mentioned the exercise selection, not even 40 minutes ago, one of my volleyball girls, um, she had we had put her on a leg press because was dealing with some ankle problems. So everybody else was front squatting, and she was leg pressing, and she's back to bilateral, or she's like full practice. But she came up to me during the lift and was like, "Hey, can I stay with leg press?" And I was like, "Yes, but why?" Just out of curiosity. And she said, "I've never felt it, or I've never felt a lower body exercise more than that." So like to me, that's a good enough reason. Could you give me? I mean, if we wanted to get into the weeds, yeah, there's plenty of reasons why you could say a front squat is quote unquote better or a more athletic position or more functional, whatever buzzword you want to use. Fine. Um, but if all I'm really doing at the moment is the only if the only reason I've chosen front squat is because it's a good way to load them to load them under a deep degree of knee flexion and hip flexion, I can still fit that definition with a leg press. And so if she's coming to me and saying, "Hey, squatting hasn't served me because I'm 6'3", this is the first time I've had an aha moment, and holy crap, I feel like I'm actually training my legs." Why on earth would I be like, "Nope, sorry, you got a front squat. You got to stick with my program." Like, yeah, dude, let's change it up. If you're telling me that's awesome, let's keep
right,
running with it. And then maybe
yeah,
in
and
6 months we'll see
you're
where your
giving her
body is fit, and that's fine.
you're giving her a little bit of autonomy in her training as well. I think that's important. I've had, again, getting that feedback from an athlete is imperative, because if, let's say, hypothetically, you just ignored that request and said, hey, no, you got to go through a front squat, maybe we reduce what you can do and we put you in a goblet or a landmine, but the reality is now she's a little torn of like, well, does he really care? Maybe,
Yeah,
is this the right program? Do I need to look at a different thing? So I'm not saying that athletes need to dictate. That's not a dictation, but it's like,
right.
maybe you're going to use in your mind, hey, we'll use the leg press as a temporary solution to get you stronger. Let's
Yeah,
build you some confidence, and then we're going to reintroduce the front squat to you at some point.
and that's I probably explain it to her like this because this is how I'll talk to, like, as an injured athlete is coming back, and it's like, "Hey, I'm all clear for the weight room, um, but it's kind of, I'm all clear for practice. Weight room is still kind of as tolerated. It's touch and go." and they'll say like, okay, do you want me to stay with this thing, or do you want me to go back to the thing everyone else is doing? And I'll tell them it assuming that the reason I've chosen the exercise is because I'm trying to just broadly, I'm trying to get you stronger, whether it's upper body, lower body, whatever. If the primary reason why I've selected that exercise is because I'm trying to get your legs stronger, just as an example, then the way you answer that question, which one should I do, is which exercise do you feel more confident and more capable and more stable and able to push closer to this is really freaking hard. Whatever the answer is, do that one. So if it's staying with the modified version, but you can really get after it versus the let's go back to this where we're just kind of practicing the movement. It's not that either one is. It's not that if they wanted to go back to the lighter one because maybe they feel better about okay, I'm doing what everybody else is doing, and it's a psychological thing.
Right.
That's fine too.
Right.
But if I'm going to kind of prioritize, hey, we're training for a reason here, then go ahead and stick with whatever has you feeling confident that you can really push yourself on that day.
The fact that she's injured and coming back kind of is something where I don't know if there's a gap in communication from medical to performance, because I've always looked as the ATCs and the medical guys and girls as part of performance,
Yeah,
right? They're on a different scope of what the performance aspect is.
yeah. But underneath the
Is
umbrella is support from
Yeah,
like
so
sports
everyone's supporting the athlete.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm wondering if there should be a better return to play system, right? Because if we have hey, she's cleared to go back to practice.
Mm-hmm.
I have it's like I almost feel a little, I don't know how to feel about that, because if she can practice, that means we should be able to do these things in the weight room, right? There's got to be things. I almost think it should be the other way around. Hey, if you can load the joint that you're coming back from, and we know that you can load it based on force production, we know that you can tolerate it based on jumping and landing,
Sure.
cutting and changing direction. Now you're ready for practice.
Sure.
And I almost think it's like, it gets counterintuitive a little bit. It's kind of like back and forth. We're like, oh, I'm ready for practice. And we see this absolutely at the youth level where this cumulative injury cycle happens over and over and over. They go to PT, they get cleared by PT or their primary care physician, and then they go back to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple weeks later, it's now we're dealing with the same inflammatory cycle.
Right, and I will say, like right off the bat, we're very fortunate that our weight room is right above our athletic training offices. So, like, sports medicine is directly underneath us. So, we're very lucky in that the logistics aren't a problem, and then also, just quite frankly, we have a great sports medicine staff. So, I just had a conversation with their athletic trainer yesterday. It's very easy for us to just chit chat, and they're great about communicating as well as possible. I mean, they're spread crazy thin. It's really no one's fault, but it just kind of is the nature of college sports. So they do a great job despite having to juggle X number of teams. I think with regards to what you're saying about, I can 100% understand the logic that you just used. The way that I tend to operate in the collegiate sector is like athlete X has a fatigue cup, and I'm using the word fatigue very, very broadly, whether you want to say that's central fatigue or actual, there's a number of reps, or there's an amount of load that a certain joint can withstand for the day. I always treat it as the sport, and therefore the sport coach gets first dibs on how much they want to fill that cup up, and then we come in second and get to fill it up the rest. So if a coach wants to fill it up 100%, then if I wrote a program that's going to fill it up 30, I have to adjust, not the coach. Now, ideally, the coach and I are sitting down and we're planning this together. It's not just two separate entities. You do your thing, I'll do my thing, and that's it. But in terms of sort of priority, it's coach gets to decide. I'd like for them to be using this much of their cup for practice or whatever it is. So let's say that cup gets smaller because of I'm returning from injury or I'm limited in some degree. I don't mind a coach saying I'd like to prioritize their limited ability to do X, Y, and Z towards the court or towards the field or whatever it is, and go from there. Now, but as you said, like it is, you could get into the weeds and sort of get down to the numbers and almost try to quantify it and say, look, if they're going to experience X amount of pounds of force or whatever the case may be, let's see if they can demonstrate that first. Like let's get them in a position where they're objectively showing us they can or cannot do a thing that's going to cause them that much stress in practice and then clear them that way. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
I really do. I get the skill coach's argument.
yeah,
I need my players. I need them available. We've got to compete.
right,
He or she is a contributing partner in this team. They're a leader, or hey, he's a key component to what I do. I need him back.
sure,
And I've heard this term used that the head coach is the head of sports performance, regardless. It does not matter. And that's it's now I really understand that, have been in the university system myself, or which I was very fortunate that the university I was a part of, or still a part of, is they've allowed me to do this thing specifically,
mm-hmm.
and not have to beg for, hey, well, this athlete needs this or you need that. Or it's really been, and knock on wood, we've really hadn't dealt with any injury for that net, so we hadn't had that conversation yet. But the coaches that we get involved with, it's really important for us to have these conversations up front and
Yeah,
going, hey, I if an athlete gets injured, here's the protocol. We know that they're going to go through medical. We know they're going to go through athletic training. We know they're going to go through physical therapy and rehab. But when they get cleared from their basic functions, range of motion, load tolerance, now it's like, how much more do we need to actually get them to perform? So I think there's a difference of the return to play of, hey, I'm cleared to go to practice and play, that I'm here to compete and actually do things. So having those conversations, and I'm sure that, and it's college where these, nope, this is how the chain starts, this is where it ends, and I need my player back. They're going to come here first. We're going to integrate them in. And that's a key component that I don't know if all coaches get to experience, is the integration of, hey, maybe we're going to bring this athlete back in, but we're only going to limit her to 15 minutes. We're going to give her the warm up. We're going to give her this. We're going to give her a
yeah,
little bit of this, and then she's off for you for the next 45. I love that because it gives the athlete the sense of back into belonging.
yeah,
But it's
100%.
also, hey, we need to build that confidence so you can go do what you want to do and compete. Do you want, as a head coach, I would rather, and I would hope that most head coaches think this way, is that I want my athletes to be as close to 100% as possible for me to go compete, depending on the season.
Sure.
So then I'm going to lean on you and go, hey, Connor, I need her to be 100%. Hey, just take her. We'll
Yeah,
integrate her in. Let me know what she can do.
yeah.
I don't, have you come across where coaches give you that? Because I know obviously you've been, this is not the only school that you've been at. I'm sure that there's been other schools and other organizations that you haven't had that success, or maybe you've had that conversation, or maybe you have.
Well, the last few people that I've either spoken to or listened to, so Anthony Cockrell with SMU volleyball, Colin Corcoran, Miami volleyball. I think it's Molly Benetti at South Carolina women's basketball. Spoken with Colin, listened to Anthony and Molly, but all three of them have gone out of their way to say they were either asked specifically or it just came up in conversation, but they were like some degree of like, yeah, coaching staff really so and so, like something to the effect of they're in lockstep. So like you just said, that having those conversations up front, to me, those three people, it sure sounds like those conversations were had. They know exactly what's going on. It's very much not we're going to do our thing, you're going to do your thing, and hopefully it ends up being good for the athlete. It's a comprehensive, it's the front is it's a singular front. Like there's no miscommunication, there's no lack of communication, and I think they have the quote unquote luxury of that's maybe they have one other team or two smaller Olympic teams, but by and large, like that's what they do. They are a part of the staff. So whereas with us, and I certainly don't want to use this as an excuse or anything like that, it's more difficult. That's all. In that we're serving a much larger number of teams. So just the time and the difficulty of actually sitting down, say day to day, week to week, month to month, or even just once at the beginning of the semester, it becomes more difficult. But the conversations still need to be had. And I mean, by and large, I know our coaches do a very good job of keeping us as much in the know as possible. Because sometimes it varies by coaching staff where sometimes they're not entirely sure what they're doing that week. And not from a standpoint of a lack of preparedness, but just, they again, shoot from the hip, but not in a negative way. They kind of want to, it's very fluid and they want to see how the team is doing and they base what the next practice is going to be off the last practice, which is all fine. It just creates some more variables for everybody else involved, but all good. And then there's other coaches where I'm thinking of one in particular that he could probably tell me what his practice plan is for 2 seasons from now. And that would enable us to really sit down and just like, hey, let's hash this all out right now. But I think one way or the other, yeah, the conversation needs to be had up front and it needs to be honest. That's probably maybe what gets in the way of those conversations happening at all or them being fruitful is an underpinning of who's really in control or just egos in general of, well, I'm in charge of this, so someone's not going to have an opinion of how I do it or vice versa or whatever. So we're very lucky that all of our coaches are basically like, look, I care about the health and well-being of my student athletes and I care about winning. So everything else, even though disagreements occur all the time, people are human. It's very quickly, let's get to the root of this problem rather than let's dance around, the egos of, well, don't tell me what to do. It's, look, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. Let's just have a conversation
Right.
about what we think is best.
Yeah. In a perfect world, in a perfect scenario, how would you, right? Let's say you're the president of NCAA athletics, whatever it is, and you're coming up with this process and you're like, hey, this is what we're going to roll out to make sure that the care is the process is standardized across the thing. And I'm sure it's already similar to that degree, but um, and I'll circle back around. There are strength and conditioning coaches in the collegiate setting that only have one team,
Mm-hmm.
and they get paid very well to do that one team. At least at the highest levels, right? Maybe
Sure.
Power Five or Top 10, whatever. But there are some lower level division, 2 or 3, again, that are piled with 3 teams, and they've got to make these exercise selection choices of how do I just make sure everybody's getting strong across the board and doing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I get that, I really do. But I also go, hey, maybe we know we want to squat, but maybe we choose a different exercise for this sport. Or maybe of that squat. It's still a squat, still a pattern,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe we do it a little bit more specifically, you know, for the time of year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's you're the top dog, and director Gettemy goes like, hey, this is what it looks like across the board. What do you think that looks like?
Well, I suppose if you're granting me a little bit more of a fantasy, I'll remove the financial aspect of this because obviously this would right off the bat that's what the issue would be. But
Right.
and I'm sure there's some schools where this might be the case, maybe not the NCAA level, but maybe at a high school level. If you're not going to hire one coach to coach multiple sports teams, why are you suddenly expecting that of your support staff, that they're going to split their time between 5 or 6 different teams? Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
if you can't afford to say, and fine, like, I could see how it would be reasonable to expect someone to handle X number of teams, or perhaps X number of athletes. Maybe it's 4 or 5 teams, but each team's only got 5 people. Maybe it's your tennises and your golfs.
Sure.
But it would be sort of like a class size thing of like, look, you are not going to be responsible for handling any more than X amount of teams or X amount of athletes or whatever, because we cannot honestly say, despite you might be working as hard as you possibly can, you can't honestly tell a certain sport coach or a certain group of athletes that they got your 100% best. They might have gotten a pretty good coaching and a pretty good program, but you just aren't able to create the best possible thing you can create when you also have to do that for 5 other entities. So the
Yep.
rule the rule or the policy would be something to the degree of, you need to be able to provide each team that you sponsor as an NCAA sport X amount of guaranteed support staff hours, or some sort of quantifiable measurement. And if you can't do that, you can't afford to have sports. Like, that's really what it boils down to. Is it's been let off the hook for decades and decades, where everyone thinks they're underpaid, and everybody is underpaid. But athletic trainers, sports
Yeah.
performance staff, support staff in general, it's an undervalued, underpaid industry, and so it's difficult to enact any real change. But that's what I would say is, you don't pay somebody $10,000 stipend and expect them to behave like a full-time employee. That's just not reasonable. And I see that at the athletic training. I see that in sports medicine. I see it in sports performance, and it's just not
Yeah.
realistic.
I don't want to name the university that literally just did that.
Oh,
I
I
think
see it all the time. Like
the annual contract was 24 or $28,000. And come on, man. Like,
yeah. Now
do
we
you
now
not do
and
you really not value and it's almost like, again, from a certain lens, is if you do not do this well, your team is not going to compete well. They're not going to be strong. They're not going to be fast. They're not going to be agile. They're not, even if they get injured, their return to play is much faster because they're just that strong, that much stronger than
Right.
their peers, right? But that allows again, as a supporting staff member, that allows then the head coach to continue to plug and play these athletes where he deems to see fit.
Yeah.
Um, I don't understand why that's not like a thought across the board, but I do understand the constraints because of the financial constraints, maybe
Yeah.
the time constraints that the NCAA's put on. Maybe in the spring, you're right. There's a limited contact for strength coaches. There's limited contact for regular coaches or whatever it is. So I think maybe not strength coaches, but I know
Yeah.
skill coaches. But the thing is, if we could get a dedicated coach to a team to the support of that, you made such a valid point, and I've been yelling this from the rooftops, is if you're a high school, why are you allowed do you can't have that same skill coach have 6 teams
Yeah.
and expect the same result for all 6 teams. If one was really successful but the other 5 are just redheaded stepchilds.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I would have to go back and learn my history of why it is the way it is. I mean, it's if you were to start over and say, how do we come up with a developmental model to get athletically inclined youth to the professional level? We've identified this person's special. We think that they're really going to be able to turn this into a career. Nobody would say, let's come up with let's pair it up with college or academia. Like, That's not how academies work in Europe when it comes to soccer. It's the whenever you see like an SEC football game draw over 100,000 people, people in Europe are like, "What on earth? You're watching schoolboy sports? Like that's what they call it, like schoolboy football. What on earth are you
Yeah.
doing?" So because colleges had athletics, that's fine. I'm not saying that college athletics shouldn't exist. I'm saying to have the developmental model and the pipeline to professional sports run through college athletics is ridiculous because you end up with stuff like this. So we've gotten this way not because of I assume it's not any one person's fault. It's that colleges had sports, which is fine, and then they just got more and more popular and more popular, and kind of it was just like, oh well, this is just how it is now. But if you again, just
Well,
to
it's
reiterate,
a business.
if you were just
It's
starting over, if you were starting from scratch, nobody would be like, let's marry professional athletic development with college.
listen. It's obviously big business, right?
Yeah. This is too
there's
big to
lots
fail.
of.
It's not changing.
So I'm sorry. Say that again.
This is too big to fail. It's not changing. It's only going to get worse.
Yeah, right. So it's such a big business, right? It's such a thing that everybody's integrated in. Where educational institutions are integrated, corporate sponsorships are integrated. We are integrated essentially, right? Being third party, being having different services that allow us to help universities, but it's the same. It's and again, it's not the good with the bad. We're just discussing the nuances of everything involved
Hmm.
through these lenses, and that's really important to identify right out of the gate. Is I'm not bash. I don't want to bash or I don't want to degrade college athletics. I don't want to
Right.
degrade college strength coaches or even the skill coaches that are involved. But I think that these nuanced conversations really need to be had very early on and go, hey, we don't want to be like program B down the road because we want to have a set standard. And what are those standards and does it look like within our financial means? What does that look like in our regulatory means in the NCAA? So but I wanted to have further conversations with coaches like yourself to go, hey, what are some of the things that you guys struggle with? What are some of the things that you want to see companies like ours do for coaches like you ahead of time?
But I think we touched on it already. I mean, immediate answer has got to be uh, proprioception and understanding of I should say movement competency. So I think we
Right.
talked about in our previous conversation that the best performers, so the highest performers in whoever the best basketball player is on the court, they some of them are either the biggest or the fastest or whatever, but the elite soccer player, the elite basketball player, typically is the best mover. They are the best solver of movement problems. You have to get from point A to point B, and somebody's in the way or something is in the way. Um, they have the biggest toolbox and the sharpest tools with which to solve that problem. Um, and so I think that comes from obviously there's a level like force production is a valuable thing, and rate of force production is a valuable thing. But the ability to use both of those traits in as many positions as possible at any to with a degree of coordination that allows you to improvise and put these different movements together and combine and so on and so forth, that's going to do more for you than I can produce more force than anybody else on the field, or I can do it at a quicker rate than anybody else. Those things will absolutely get you above some people. Or if we're talking about who has the highest likelihood of success, it's not necessarily going to be the strongest person or the fastest person. It's the person that is most well equipped to solve movement problems, and that's movement competency. That's an understanding of how your body moves in space, and there's an underpinning of I have strength in those positions and I can be explosive out of those positions, but you got to get to those positions and you have to know what those positions even are.
Yeah, man, that is key, and it's also a thing of where I would really like to see younger athletes take this on, or even having like, hey, here's a template of what you should be doing in order to get to us.
Hmm.
If you're a senior in high school and you, again, because we do have seniors that commit early, or we have,
Yeah,
freshmen that commit, or depending on the sport, whatever that is, getting with that strength coach, getting with that organization early on and going, hey, we're a year away from entering into your program, but we want to make sure that we are competent coming in. Hey, what do we need? What local network of strength coaches are around? Is there a template that you can send us?
yeah,
Having those conversations with those athletes early on is obviously, again, really important. And having those nuances, and I think doing what you're doing outside of Flagler is going to benefit everybody, right?
sure.
It's one of those things that we've had several college coaches call us and go, hey, your freshmen are the most well-prepared freshmen that we've had. That's great, right? Great. Pat on the back, we've prepared them, but also kudos to them for actually taking the initiative to start early
Yeah,
before having to go into this, hey, I only have a couple of weeks, I only have a month, or I have 6 weeks before I have to report in. We've been able to adopt this long-term athletic development model
hmm,
and kind of implement it. Hey, if you're a high school freshman and you want to play college athletics, you should really start now. And you
yeah,
should really start what we call micro dosing. We want to micro dose you into these new areas so you can have the right adaptations. You're not crazy sore. I don't need to make you, run until you vomit. I don't need you to do 105 burpee, right? I can microdose you. It gives parents time to see their growth and not be, and again, because we're in such a microwave society, we've got to do this now.
yeah. And so
And
for you
that's a struggle.
to you answered your own question better than I
I
did. So
know. Yeah.
the actual question you asked me was like,
Yeah.
what can you guys do? And I 100% agree that it's you know you're serving as the precursor to what we're doing, and that's a big ask in terms of egos because it's I want to it's I think it's natural for somebody to be like, well, I want them doing my thing and this that and the other, but ultimately it's do whatever thing is gonna get you right for my thing, so to speak. So like when my athletes go home over the summer, I'm gonna say to their faces, I'm sure a bunch of you have your own trainers. Like, hey, I'm writing you all a summer program. Every single one of you is getting a summer program. I'm sure some of you have your own trainers. You doing my summer program when I'm not watching you and you're in Planet Fitness is not better than you working with somebody that has eyes on you all the time. Now, obviously, that person's got to actually be a good coach and write a good program, but I'd like to have enough faith in my industry that there's more coaches like you than there are coaches that pulled their certification out of a Wheaties box. So, as so, and that the guiding what underpins that opinion is I just want you guys to make, or I just want you guys coming back better than whenever you left, or like you said, rising freshmen. I want you coming in ready to get to work rather than waiting
Yeah.
to fix something. And you touched on it kind of very lastly, but there's still a lot. I think one of the number one things that prevents, say, those, high schoolers or early high school or even earlier, 15, 14, 13, that is a hugely useful time to be training. But I think the same common misperceptions still damaging enough that enough people are like, well, I don't want my kid to, as soon as they even just hear the word training or workout or athletic development or whatever, it's like, well, you should only do that when you're X years old or whatever. And like,
Yeah, the puberty conversation is still there, right? I mean,
it's decades
we're
and it's
also having the
still
same conversation with creatine, right? Creatine monohydrate. We're having the same conversation with some of these other things that we know unequivocally
Yeah.
are absolutely safe. They're unequivocally something that is natural. It is not a steroid. We've had to get away from certain
Yeah.
stigmas, right? And we know now that creatine has a great amount of effect on sleep, recovery,
Hmm.
hydration, not dehydration. It has cognitive benefits. It has memory benefits, and also obviously it has some musculatory benefits as well. So, but again, if let's say that's something you don't want to do that to a 14-year-old or 15-year-old, fine, but start them in a basic strength and conditioning program.
Yeah.
And I say this also with all due respect, do that outside of your local school as well. Because you don't know the PE teacher that was qualified to do so 25 years ago or 30 years ago that's still in the system that's still teaching PE, is still giving them the basics, doing what's needed, but again, what is making them truly qualified to make these kids athletes and movement. I think there's a difference between physical education, right,
Hmm.
health
Yeah.
and wellness, and athletics and performance.
Hmm.
And this is the gap that needs to be filled. We need great PE teachers. We need creative PE teachers, because there's kids that stare at their phone all day, and those 45 minutes of PE class is all they're going to get in activity.
Hmm.
And these PE teachers are, again, they're young, some of them are creative, but also the guys and girls that are a little bit more seasoned that have been involved with PE that are also now doing athletics hasn't transitioned or evolved into what is needed in the performance side. And that's where we're trying to say, hey, schools, this is what we can help you with. We're a supporting role. We're not here to teach you physical education. We're here to help support your skill coaches. We're here to support your educational staff on performance rather than physical education and health. Of course, there's going to be certain overlaps,
Well,
right?
that's the one thing I was going to mention was just take PE because using the high school setting, take PE, take actual weightlifting, like the sport of weightlifting, and
Okay.
sports performance. All three of those have plenty of crossover, and as we had mentioned in a previous conversation, especially at that age, any consistent stimulus is going to get some type of positive adaptation. Now, there's a different degrees of okay, well, how good is this for you? But anything consistent. So I think that's why uh, you know that's why people we talked we use the chef analogy of like people don't think they can just pick up ingredients and whip up some amazing dish. So why would they think they can do that with the human body? And it's because if you make an awful dish, you pretty objectively and pretty quickly understand this tastes terrible. I have failed at this. As opposed to if you write a pretty crappy program, but a young person that is ready to adapt to anything does it consistently over a long period of time, they'll get something out of it. And so
Right.
not only is it you don't learn that it was a bad program, you actually think it's a good one because you got something out of it. So I think that's where the difficulty comes from is especially in high school. High schoolers will adapt to just about anything, and so just about anyone can throw just about anything at them and get something out of it.
They're young. They're going to adapt.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And because the window, I think we've right the window of adaptation as the athlete ages and more specificity comes along in the sport, et cetera. That window starts to really narrow. And again, if you're a collegiate athlete, your window is still a little open, but you really should have been like dialed in really early on to get to that window. And I think that's what separates those athletes going from a high level, Division 1 to a mid Division 2 or low division or high Division 3, whatever it is. And by the way, I don't care if you're D1 or D3. There's great programs at every single
Oh
level,
yeah.
and there's a school for every single athlete that can fit in that program. It's finding the right one. There's hundreds of universities out here,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to go D1. So
Don't
now
get
you've
started on the phrase "go D1."
well, we've yeah, and it's a side rant where it's we must go D1. We have to, right. We've invested into our children. They've done all the work. They've got good grade. They have to go Division 1,
Yeah.
and and many do. But if you're a lucky athlete that gets to go to a good Division 2 school like Flagler,
Mm-hmm.
holy cow, man, you're still in that top. What is it, 7% of the country?
Yeah.
And then if you're lucky enough to developed really well at Flagler and Flagler did their job, everybody's happy, and you get to move into a Division 1 school, man,
Yeah.
that's the great part of like, what school did you come from? You're really well put together. I came from Flagler. So it's not, it's all tides rise type of thing, but I don't think that I don't think there's athletes that think that way though.
No, it's not. I mean, I won't go on the full rant, but yeah, the phrase "go D1" has ruined more promising athletic careers uh, than probably anything else, because it captures a whole bunch of kids that could maybe get a walk-on spot or a preferred walk-on, or maybe even a bit of a scholarship, or whatever it is. But they're going to rot on the bench. It's not
Yeah.
even going to be close. Like, they're not going to get the. And I don't blame. This is not me throwing Division 1 under the bus. I don't really blame any Division 1 coaches for focusing their limited time and energy on the people that are going
Yeah.
to contribute.
Correct. Yeah.
So
We're
like,
not blaming
this
you.
isn't me being shame on Division 1 coaches. It's I would like to give the agency and perhaps the responsibility, if you want to use that word, to the athlete and say, dude, you got to read the writing on the wall. And that's another rant I could go on, is like the level of honesty that people don't have with college athletes nowadays, like especially with transfer portal being what it is and all that. Like, there's kids that are on their fourth year in their fourth school, and no one has still yet they have yet to be told you're the problem. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, for
and
sure.
so I'm not blaming. I want to give the athlete the responsibility, because agency is the best thing that one can have, control over one's life. But it's pretty difficult for them to see what's right in front of their face when that's not what they've been told their entire lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to leave it on that, man. It looks like I'm having some technical issues on this side of the world.
All good.
And but your insights to seeing the different things of what's going on in college and your different viewpoints is appreciated. Thank you again for coming up, chatting with me. It was gracious of you to spend your time. And Flagler's got it seems like they've got a really good program. You guys have really tried to, you seem like you're really trying to put it together and give everybody the best that they can. And it's working. So I appreciate it, man. Thank you for coming on, and we'll be in touch soon. If anybody wants to, that's in the St. Augustine area, that want to get a hold of you for training, or want to chat with you about Flagler or anything else, how can they get a hold of you?
Easiest way, just universally, would just be my Instagram. So at Get Strong Performance. The Get has two T's, so GETT Strong Performance, and they can just shoot me a DM. I am very much happy to. I'm not someone that's like, hey, if you want to ask me a question, you got to pay for information. Like, if anyone wants to pick my brain about, hey, I'm a high schooler, what should I do? I'm a parent of a high schooler. I'm another college coach, or I'm an up and coming strength coach. Like, I will talk about anything to anyone for as long as they want. So please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, Connor, man, I appreciate coming on, and we'll be in touch soon.
All the best. I appreciate you.
Thank you, man.
Take care.